Have you ever been the kind of person who sits down to study seriously, reads the same page over and over again, highlights almost every line, and even feels like you understand it? But just a few days later, when you look back, you've almost forgotten everything. I've been there. Not just once, but many times. There were periods when I studied really hard, sitting for hours, eyes glued to the page, hands filling entire sheets with notes. From the outside, I looked like someone who was extremely focused, but there was something uncomfortable that I didn't want to admit. I wasn't remembering much. Sometimes it was even worse. I had this feeling that I understood, but when I tried to explain it, my mind would go completely blank. That feeling is strange. It's like watching a really engaging movie, where everything feels clear, but when someone asks, "What was it about?" you can only remember a few random scenes, but you can't piece them together into a story. And the most frustrating part is this. You know you spent the time, you know you put in the effort, but the results don't match. So you start questioning yourself. Maybe I'm not smart enough. Maybe I'm just not good at studying. Maybe some people are just born with better memory. I used to think that too. Until one day I realized something even more uncomfortable. Maybe the problem isn't that I'm not studying enough. Maybe I'm studying the wrong way. More specifically, I realized I was doing something that many people think is studying, but is actually just re-exposing yourself to information, rereading, rewatching, re-highlighting. It sounds logical. If your brain sees something many times, it should remember it, right? But in reality, that's not how it works. I started noticing something interesting. The times I remembered things the longest were not when I read the most, but when I was forced to remember. For example, when someone asked me an unexpected question, when I tried to explain something to someone else, or when I sat down, closed the book, and tried to recall what I just learned. In those moments, my mind worked very differently. It wasn't, "Oh yeah, this looks familiar." It was more like searching, digging, trying to reconstruct the information. Like trying to find something in a dark room. You can't see it in front of you anymore. You have to feel your way through. At first, it's uncomfortable, slow. Sometimes it even feels like you're getting worse. But strangely, that's when things stick the most. That's when I started thinking, maybe the brain doesn't learn best when you put information in. Maybe it learns better when you try to pull information out. And that's when I first heard about a concept called active recall. It sounds simple, but if you truly understand it, it can completely change how you see learning. But before we talk about how to apply it, there's a more important question. Why does rereading, something that feels like studying, make us feel like we understand, but actually doesn't help us remember? I used to think learning was like filling a container. The more you read, watch, and write, the fuller it gets. It sounds logical, but over time I realized the brain is not a container. It's more like a storage room. And the real problem isn't how much you put in. It's whether you can find it when you need it. When you reread, your brain is doing something called recognition. It's saying, "Oh, I've seen this before." That feeling is very misleading. It creates the illusion that, "I understand this." But in reality, you're only recognizing the information when it's right in front of you. It's like seeing a face and thinking you know the person. But when you try to recall their name, you freeze. Active recall is completely different. It forces you to retrieve information. No hints, no material in front of you, just you and your memory. From a biological perspective, this has to do with how neurons connect. Every time you learn something, you create a small connection. But at first, that connection is weak. If you only reread, it's like standing at the start of a path and looking at it. You see it, but you don't walk it. When you recall, you're walking that path. Each time you walk it, it becomes clearer, like a trail in the forest. If no one uses it, it fades. But if you walk it often, it becomes easy to follow. And here's the key point. Your brain doesn't care how many times you've seen something. It cares how many times you've retrieved it. There's a powerful paradox. Rereading, easy while learning, hard when recalling. Active recall, hard while learning, easy when recalling. And this paradox is what causes so many people to go in the wrong direction, because we naturally prefer what feels easy. But effective learning is rarely easy. If you're using active recall correctly, you'll notice. You hesitate. You remember partially. Sometimes you go blank, and you might think, is this even working? But that difficulty is actually a signal that your brain is learning. When you struggle to recall, your brain realizes this matters and starts strengthening the connection. But once people understand this, they often fall into another trap. They start forcing it, testing themselves constantly, making it as hard as possible, pushing their brain too far. It sounds disciplined, but over time you feel tired, burned out, and start avoiding studying altogether. Active recall is not about forcing your brain, it's about working with it. Like going to the gym. You don't walk in on day one and double the weight hoping to grow faster. You'll either get injured or quit. Here's a simple way to apply it. Read a short section. Close it. Ask yourself, what did I just read? If I had to explain it, what would I say? Then open the material again. Check. Fix mistakes. Repeat after a few days. You don't need perfection. You just need to genuinely try to recall. One important idea. Forgetting is not failure. It's part of learning. In fact, the best time to recall is not when you remember clearly. It's when you're starting to forget. Because that's when your brain has to work the hardest, and that effort makes the memory stronger. Over time, you'll realize real knowledge is not what you recognize when you see it. It's what you can retrieve when you need it. You don't need to know more. You need to know whether what you know is usable. Active recall won't make you a genius. It won't make learning easy, but it will help you. Remember longer, understand deeper, study less repeatedly, and most importantly, reduce waste. Wasted time studying without remembering. Wasted effort learning things you can't use. If you had to summarize it in one sentence, learning is not about putting information in. It's about training your ability to pull it out. You don't need to try harder. You just need to understand better. Thanks for listening. Subscribe for more.